Joey, you ever been in a ship's bridge before?
No. And my name's not Joey. And three, is this from Airplane? Is that what you're doing?
You like films about gladiators?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Actually, Gladiator is one of my favorite movies ever.
Good historical fiction.
Very good. Not accurate, but good. In fact, speaking of accurate historical fiction, we've got a guest on the show who's written a number of books that are historical fiction and accurate.
You mean like Braveheart?
Did I say accurate or inaccurate?
Oh, yes.
Exactly. Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Sons of History podcast. I am Dustin Bass,
And I'm Alan Joaquin.
and he's a handsome man, and there is no debate, as people like to yell and scream every so often. This is not a debate. And honestly, this is probably the one thing that I don't think is a debate, is you're just handsome. Your beauty. Look at yourself.
You know,
Can you look at yourself? Is there a mirror in here? No, there's not.
Every minute of every day, I, have one in my car when I drive here. I'm not looking at the road.
Is that why you had a wreck last week?
Well, that was not my fault. Just in case
boy.
someone is watching.
Yeah, just
This
in
ever
case.
goes to trial.
It was not my fault. Well, beautiful. Yeah, definitely not. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't yet, please go to YouTube. If you're watching it on YouTube right now, click the subscribe button and also click the bell so you'll get an alert for whenever a new video comes up. Also, if you're listening on the podcast, wherever you're listening to, hit the subscribe button. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, do us a huge favor and leave us a rating or a review, or a review actually would be better. And while you're at it, just busy, go ahead and follow us on Instagram and Facebook too. That would be absolutely stellar. Tell your family and friends, your grandchildren. Actually, you know what? Let this be people's Christmas present.
Yes.
Is directing people to all of our stuff. Yeah.
It's good videos.
You talk about saving money in this economy.
Yeah, because
Speaking of bad economies,
left me speechless.
exactly. Yeah. Speaking of economies, I say this week.
In history. Yes, let's do that.
Let's go ahead and jump into it.
All right. I won't leave me speechless.
No, not at all. All right, so
Were we going to time this?
I'm freaking glad you said it. Yes, actually, we need to
All right.
make sure we're timing it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Let me see. Okay. Oh, there's my official timer.
Are you ready? Okay, 2 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes in history. Okay,
Let me
and
know.
my time starts now. Okay, so my This Week in History is December 6th, 1964. This is really my all-time favorite movie, Christmas movie. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer claymation. Burl Ives, one of your favorite individuals. Anyways,
Not better than Die Hard.
on that day, December 6, 1964, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer claymation aired for the very first time on television, and it left us just in awe.
Ready, Rudolph?
Ready, Santa?
Now, okay, boy or girl who played Rudolph? Guess.
Should we be assigning genders this soon?
I don't know.
Bart Simpson's a girl, so I couldn't even tell you. And the fact that you even asked that question tells me it's a woman.
Exactly.
Girl, she, her.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was played by Billy May Richards. Now, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was actually created in 1939 by a guy by the name of Robert L. May, who was a catalog writer for Montgomery Ward. Montgomery Ward gave away free books at each Christmas, and May decided he would create a book about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, or not the claymation, just the reindeer. Montgomery Ward gave out 2 million copies of the books, and it was 10 years later that Mr. May actually got the rights to the book. He eventually, with his brother-in-law, who's a songwriter, turned the story into a song. Gene Autry picked it up.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer.
It blew up. And then a few years later, about 15 years later, we have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, claymation, one of my favorites of all time. And it's interesting that this movie actually represents Robert L. May's life. And boom! Look at that. Look at that. Oh, you didn't stop it in time.
201.
201, but you know what it was. It was at
Yeah.
the 2-minute mark. All right. Wow.
All right.
Nailed it.
Well, you're gonna have to do me on yours.
Hey, man, don't ever talk like that again.
Yeah.
All right, are you ready?
I am ready.
All
Okay.
right, time started.
Mine takes place during World War I, December 9 through 11 of 1917. That was when the British captured Jerusalem, and it was the first time since 1244 that Jerusalem was not controlled by an Islamic power. That was Frederick II. He was the Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick II. So, anyway, what's his name? Richard the Lionheart failed in his endeavor to try to capture it.
Oh, Richard.
All right, so now if you watch the movie, what's that? Lawrence of Arabia. You had T.E. Lawrence was in there. You had Archibald Murray, who was the commander. He failed in 2 attacks on Gaza. This is in the Palestinian areas. So Edmund Allenby, who did very well on the Western Front, he comes in, he becomes the commander, he captures Gaza, captures Beersheba. Now UK Prime Minister David Lloyd George says, capture Jerusalem by Christmas. So, they had these offensives, they were near Jerusalem. Now on December the 9th, there was this British cook by the name of Private Murch. He was trying to find eggs. He was approached by the mayor of Jerusalem on a horse carrying a white flag named Hussein Salim el-Husseini. He said, I want to surrender Jerusalem. The cook was like, let me let you talk to my brigadier general by the name of C.F. Watson. C.F. Watson contacted John Shea, who was a divisional major general, who then contacts General Allenby. So Allenby's like, don't do anything, I'll be there. And 2 days later, he shows up. Now, General Allenby was a religious man. He knew that Jesus was supposed to approach on a horse. He showed up on a donkey. And Kaiser Wilhelm II looked like an ass because he showed up a few years earlier on a horse, and they didn't like that. So as he approached the gates to Jerusalem, he dismounted. I've heard, you know what? The hell with it. I want to tell my story. General Allenby dismounted. I've read he was on a horse. I read he was in a car. Either way, he got up. He didn't want to ride in on a horse, and he walked through the gates into Jerusalem as the conqueror. And that really made everybody impressed with him. So,
Fantastic.
General Allenby and Jerusalem was captured. And then, the British had it, and then there was a big conflict in 47, 48, 49. Then 67, Israel captures it. So anyway, that happened December 9 through 11, 1917.
You can never do it. It's such
You
a shame.
can't,
It's such a
shame.
Can't do it. David Lloyd George, just in case people don't know, he was the Prime Minister of Britain during World War I. So I know you threw that name out there. Also, if you heard that was not me. That was Madison, my dog. She already knew that you weren't going to be able to make the time.
No, shut up.
All right, so that is This Week in History. All right, well, without further ado, despite the fact that Alan went way over the 2-minute mark, and as General Allenby would have said one day, this is preposterous, I cannot believe that you would even consider doing something as so ridiculously preposterous.
How much time did you just spend on that? Watch Lawrence of Arabia, 'cause you can't rush history.
But we can rush to this show, huh? Is that a good? I think that's a pretty spot on Allenby. Anyways, all right. So, ladies and gentlemen,
No, it's not.
Not even close.
No, that
How did he
Jack
talk?
Hawkins does.
How did he talk?
I can't do.
Give me something.
No, you're undisciplined. You're.
In a
I
British
remember that,
accent.
yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
trash. Anyways, it
I'm
sounded
not
a lot like your current
I'm not an
accent.
actor.
All right, so we've got James Haley, the distinguished James Haley, who is going to be joining us momentarily. He has won twice the Western Writers of America Spur Award and the Texas Historical Commission T.R. Fehrenbach Book Award. Along with that, he's a member of the Texas Institute of Fellows. No, he's not. An Institute of Letters and a fellow of the Texas State Historical Society. He's the author of more than 20 books, including biographies on Jack London and Sam Houston, which won 9 awards. And he's also done histories on Texas, Hawaii, the Texas Supreme Court, and the Apaches. And his latest works, his latest works are the historical fiction naval series called the Putnam Series. He recently put together the 4th installment, which we're going to be talking about, entitled Captain. Man, I am really struggling. You know why? Because I'm doing all the talking, and I hate it. And I'm pretty sure all of our listeners are tired of hearing my voice. Captain Putnam for the Republic of Texas.
Oh, you're better at this than I am.
Gosh, I got it. Well, I think it's because every once in a while I do a British accent that is mind-blowing at the same time it is comical. No?
I can
Nothing?
do Henry Kissinger, but I don't, not now. It's
Yeah, even his wife's out. Anyways, all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got James Haley on the line. James, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm terrific, Dustin. How are you?
I'm good. It is absolute pleasure to have you on. Mutual friend connected us. Denton Florian. He was like, he had mentioned you so much, and I had already read one of the Putnam series books, and I was like, hey man, if you got James Haley's number, we'd love to have him on the show. And ta-da, here we are.
I love Denton. You have no idea what that man went through trying to produce that Sam Houston documentary of his. I mean, that was a labor of love that went year after year after year. And I'm not sure that while he was raising money for it, his kids got the kind of Christmas presents they should have. I mean, he sacrificed a lot to make that show happen. Of course, it won 5 Emmys. So he got some satisfaction out of that. But yeah, Denton's a terrific guy.
He really is.
Yeah.
And Denton, if you're watching, we love you, man. Yeah.
Hi, Denton.
Yeah. So, yeah, we had him as one of our guest speakers for our very first history event. Had him and Dr. Harden speak. So we think fondly of Denton.
Yeah, first time I met him was when we had dinner together. So it was
Yeah, the night before we had everything had our event put together. So
Dinner with Steve Harden.
Steve Harden and Denton Florian and Jody Ginn.
yeah.
So,
Jody and I have known each other for many, many years.
Yeah, Jody seems to know everybody.
He's my go-to guy anytime I'm talking Texas Rangers with someone or general Texas history. I'll just
Actually,
message him.
no. I wrote a history maybe 12 years ago about how the United States got their hands on Hawaii. And Jody and I were very good friends. And he was in grad school down in San Marcos. And I took him to Hawaii with me as a research assistant, which I'd never done before. I've always done my own research. But this was like a reality show. It's like, how many archives can you visit in 2 weeks? So I would look at the documents that I had time to. And then like a spy, he took pictures of all the rest. And I tell you what, Jody is a tremendous researcher. His instinct for what's important and what I should see and what I didn't need to see was always just golden.
Yeah, he's good stuff. Yeah. So we
He's
keep in contact with him quite often.
He's bailed me out a few times in some of my political discussions.
Yeah. So as much as we would like to discuss Denton and Jody and Steve, we're here to discuss your works, in particular the Putnam series, of which you've recently put together your 4th installment, Captain Putnam for the Republic of Texas, which I recently finished, and I loved it. I love the books because I just love the naval stories, and I think I've always liked that even as a kid. So first question that I have, so you recently finished this 4th book. The series feels like an American version of the Jack Aubrey or Hornblower series. So, did those two British series, did those play an inspiration in you writing the Putnam series? And was there any motivation to write this series because America didn't have an equivalent maritime adventure series?
Yes, they did, and yes, it was, but it wasn't my idea. Jim Hornfisher, my late agent, was in New York tending his trot line, and he was meeting with this legendary editor at G.P. Putnam Sons, Nita Taublib. What are you doing next year? Anything we can help you with? And she said that they were thinking about doing a tall ship naval history novel series like the Hornblower books or the Master and Commander books. But they were holding back because they weren't really sure that the American Navy was doing anything, like between the War of 1812 and the Civil War. And Jim said, wait, hang on, I might have somebody. And I think I was in Buffalo. I was giving Jack London lectures at SUNY Fredonia because I'd written a biography of Jack London. And I got home from the college to my bed and breakfast one evening, and there was an email from Hornfisher saying, call me, opportunity knocks. And so I called him and he told me, can you come up with a proposal for an American tall ship naval series? Well, opportunity doesn't knock very often. So I grabbed him by the belt and yanked him inside. And 2 days later, I sent them bullet point outline for 6 different novels, interlocking characters, but sequential. We start with midshipmen and then their lieutenants and so on. The Hornblower books and the Master and Commander books were never meant to be series. They just kind of grew like Topsy, which is why they're, a mess of prequels and sequels. And so we start with, these 2 buddies become buddies during the Barbary Pirate War. Blivin Putnam is from Connecticut. Sam Bandy is from South Carolina. And some of my readers guessed instantly where this series is going. It just made me laugh. So they're midshipmen and become lieutenants in the Barbary Pirate War. The second book is in the War of 1812. The third book is with the missionaries in Hawaii in the early 1820s. Now, Sam has gone broke in South Carolina, as many people did in the Panic of 1819. So he came to Texas with Stephen F. Austin in book 3. And I was getting email from people saying, I'll bet your 4th book is going to be in Texas, isn't it? And it was. So anyway, I did this outline and Nita read it. And she said, really? Send me his books. And I'd done 2 historical novels, one in British East Africa, 1890s, one in the American West. And they're kind of artsy and kind of fartsy, and Nita, she edited Danielle Steele, she's edited Dean Koontz, and they are not artsy fartsy. So I thought my goose was cooked, but she liked him. And she called me up and we had a wonderful talk. And I said, well, I'm a pretty good writer. I've got all these awards on my wall, but I've never done a bestseller. And that's what you do. So, and I put on my very best Texas accent. And I said, whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do it. And she said, excellent.
Yeah.
So that's how that got started. So yeah, they are deliberately sort of modeled on the concept of the Hornblower books and the Jack Aubrey books, but very American. It was kind of funny. I read enough of those books to get an idea of what people expect, but I didn't read all that much because I didn't want to sound like them. So I just went off and I did my research and I did my method. And one of the resources that I used was an 1818 or 1820 gunnery manual. It's called The Exercise of the Great Guns, just movement by command, exactly how you fire those big muzzle loaders. I thought, this is great. I've got to do this scene. And so I did this 3-page scene on the Constitution of exercising the guns. Come to find, Aubrey read the same thing and he wrote the same scene was it Master and Commander? The first of his books. So it's like, oh, Haley cribbed a scene from Aubrey. No, we just read the same source.
Now, with the Putnam series, there's so much detail when it comes to shipping, like captaining a ship of the line. Did this come from like your research because you were putting this Putnam series together, or is this just a personal history of knowledge of captaining a ship and ships in general?
Well, I've always had a nautical interest, but once I signed the deal with Putnam, I think I read sailing ship, oh gosh, everything about them for maybe a year and a half before I ever wrote a word. So yeah, I've got a shelf about as long as the one behind you there of seamanship and naval architecture and um, history, biographies, all that stuff. So it was a pretty deep study and pretty quick because I knew it was going to be a series, and I didn't want them to suck.
Right.
So yeah, it was a lot of research.
Well, they definitely don't suck. That's for sure.
No, they do. They sure don't. They sure don't. Now, one of your books is about the Republic of Texas. Now, when you think of the Texas Revolution, you think of the Alamo, San Jacinto. You really don't think much about the events that occurred in the Gulf of Mexico. So, can you tell our listeners some of the events that took place during the in the Gulf during the Texas Revolution?
Well, of course, we think of Santa Anna marching overland to attack the Alamo, but we forget that there was a whole second army that landed at Copano, and they were being supplied from the coast. And they had a couple of cruisers, and we had, I think, some little pop gun vessel that was not much. Now, what happened in the Gulf was important, and Sam Houston said, we have to look to a Navy for essential aid, and he was the one who ordered the first 4 ships. But it was not like, Queen Elizabeth going out to meet the Spanish Armada. In fact, what happened on the Gulf, you would probably do better to think of Henry David Thoreau on his knees watching the ants have a battle. There was not a lot of ships involved. They did not have a lot of guns. Now, they did use privateers to protect all that shipping. And so that it's sort of, my action scenes kind of focus in on that as you read, but it was not, huge broadsides across deep water because the big navies weren't involved. Now, if you happen to get killed out there, that's small comfort. It was still just as desperate and just as noisy. But no, the large navies were not involved.
Well, Dustin and I, we were sitting and talking about, the skill of your writing in these books and your knowledge. I know we were talking once about the Stephen Crane, who wrote the Red Badge of Courage, only to find out that he didn't serve in combat. Now, with your books, does your experience as a historian, is it similar to Steve Crane's? Because obviously you weren't in any combat in the early 19th century, but
well, it kind of reminds me of Dustin Hoffman being in a movie with Olivier, and Olivier, what was it, Marathon Man, where Olivier is the evil dentist and he's going to torture him with a drill and so on. Well, Dustin Hoffman was a dedicated method actor, and Olivier was not. He just laughed at the whole concept. And Dustin Hoffman was just amazed at how steely and awful his character was. He's like, how do you do that without, the method? And he said, my boy, it's called acting. You write novels, you live in your imagination. And when I wrote the Jack London biography, I had one chapter that just flummoxed me. I put it up, and that was when he's in the Yukon, because I've never been to Alaska. And if I'd gone another week, they would have had to push the book into the next season. Hornfisher was yelling at me, you've got to write this chapter. And so I just sat down and I did it. And the editor said she had to put a sweater on while she read it. So it's called art, I guess.
There you go.
Well, yeah, answers the question, but we're still impressed by what we're reading. So
yeah,
it's almost
it feels, it is just reading it, you get a sense of being on the ocean.
Well, I have been on. In fact, I think I must have been a sailor in a previous life or something. I never get seasick. In fact, I was in Santa Barbara once, and I went out on a 100-foot tourist boat to go whale watching, and we were plowing into these 10-foot swells, and all the tourists were running into the head to throw up, and I was running out to the bow with my binoculars going, where are they, where are they? And it was just high adventure to me. The thing about the historical research, when you employ it in fiction, and that's the difference between the research and the art, is if you come across a really cool character who's not that important to the history, you can elevate that character into a major character in the book where you couldn't in the history. Or if there's a really cool place that that would add so much to a story, well, it's the story that comes first. Just like in Shores of Tripoli, after the Marines have their battle at Derna, Shores of Tripoli, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's a city 1 day's ride west of Derna called Cyrene. It's the ruins of an ancient Roman city. Well, my character, Haley Putnam, is kind of like me. He's a history geek. So when the Navy's in Pompeii, this is just the time that they're starting to dig up Pompeii, and he's desperate to get them. Well, no, we have to go fight a war. And so they get to Egypt, and they came across the desert from Alexandria. They did not. It was not an amphibious assault. And so they're riding along, and he knows that out there to the south somewhere is the oasis of Siwa, where Alexander the Great was made a god. But we don't have time for that. We've got to go fight a battle. Well, after the fight at Derna, Hamet Pasha, who is actually a real historical character, said, well, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll satisfy you. So he takes him a day's ride west to Cyrene. Now, in the Bible, James of Cyrene in the Bible is from there. It's vast Roman ruins. Well, the cool thing about Cyrene is that in the ancient times, they had one product that made their economy, and it was kind of an onion called silphium. And it was believed to be, if you were a guy, it was an aphrodisiac. And if you were a woman, it was an abortifacient. So you could have all the fun you wanted and nobody would get pregnant. So the Egyptians bought it, Phoenicians bought it, Greeks bought it. In Rome, it was worth its weight in silver. In fact, the Cyrenian coins have an onion on them, or a silphium bulb. Of course, the place dried up and blew away because they picked it all. It went extinct.
Well, I mean, when I'm reading them, I mean, I don't think about eating onions. Maybe sucking on a lime, but definitely not. Is that okay to say that? Is that wrong?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Oh, I don't know who. Well, never
I think
mind.
you're in the clear. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm in the clear.
The surgeon on the Constitution, Edward Cutbush, that was actually his name. He was a highly influential doctor in his day. He wrote a big medical treatise on military medicine that was used for decades and decades. And in the second book, he was such a good character. I needed him to stay on the ship, even though in real life, he went to run the hospital at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. So there are places where the novelist had to pull rank over the historian and say, I need this for the story, and depart from the history. Because, there's all kinds of ways to write historical fiction. You can tell a story and put costumes on people. That'll get you to Braveheart. Interesting movie, not much in there ever really happened. Right. Or you can go overboard the other way and maybe invent some dialogue for actual events, and that's not very interesting. But what we did, and we had meetings about this, we decided to tell a good story, but steer that story just as close to actual events as a good story will bear. And I did it because I'm really kind of a frustrated history teacher, and the ignorance of everybody out there about history now is just appalling. I mean, the American public, more than half of them do not know what country is the only one who've ever dropped an atomic bomb in war. More than half the people out there don't know it was us. And it's just
almost not surprising.
Well, and it's not. You're right. Now that's historic. Half the people in the country cannot even read above a 9th grade level. That's why newspaper editors say you should write your stories at 8th grade level so that people can read them. It's just appalling. And I think that's one reason why we're in such a a terrible cultural divide right now is just ambient ignorance, apathy, lack of curiosity. And so I switched from doing straight up history to doing fiction because people don't want to be taught. They want to be entertained. Okay, I'll entertain you. But by the time you read this book, by golly, you're going to know about the Barbary War or the War of 1812 or the Texas Revolution. So that was sort of my personal axe to grind in doing the books. I'm glad you don't think they suck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and they're a lot of fun to read, but it's also from the historical perspective, because what you sort of demonstrated my next question is there's so much topical information in your books, and you bring a lot of surrounding issues or surrounding things like the Cyrene, and the aphrodisiac and all of that. But you pull all of this together through the characters, and I think that opens up for a sort of a broad way of presenting, one, the story, but two, presenting history and ways to think about it. And just as an illustration, your latest book, you're able to bring in a lot of controversial issues and tackle those, sort of like slavery, why the Texians were even fighting the Texas Revolution, and President Andrew Jackson. So you're able to, through your characters, and I find this really, really a positive for readers who may not know much about history, which, as we've discussed, is a lot of people. You give opposing views through Putnam. And so is providing that perspective on the issues of the time one of the secondary goals, if not the primary goals of the books, of, hey, slavery was going on, or Texians were needing to fight this war, or here's Andrew Jackson, a very, very controversial figure, and here are the ways that people thought about these issues?
That's such a good question. Absolutely, it was a primary motivator for me. In fact, when the fourth book came out, I did a Zoom interview with the proprietors and patrons of a feminist bookstore in Houston. Wonderful people, wonderful bookstore, Blue Willow Books. And I was terrified because, in book 4, Sam is having a relationship and living with Dicey, who had been a slave. And of course, in modern parlance, any such relationship is rape, full stop. The trouble is that in history, that wasn't always true. I mean, look at the Chief Justice of the Republic's Supreme Court, John Hemphill, had 2 children with Sabina, whom he sent to Wilberforce University in Ohio and left everything to them. You did have mixed race families even in that time. Well, I was really afraid of blowback of this relationship between Sam and Dicey. And I talked about it with my editor, and she said, no, you should be fine because you gave Dicey her agency. This was her doing. In fact, when Captain Putnam asked her if she thinks this is, really proper for her to be in this relationship, she says, where did you find such a high horse to sit on? Mm-hmm. Look around you, Captain Putnam. This is just as good as this life will ever get for me. He can't free me because it's not, he can't marry me because it's not legal. He can't free me because the slave catchers will get me and sell me to somebody else. I've got it pretty good here. So you just kind of settle down and leave us alone. But because I gave Dicey her choice of what to do, I think she wound up being the bookstore people's favorite character in the book. As indeed, she's one of my very favorite characters. Right. I love Dicey. Oh, by the way, that's another thing that talk about something to bring in. My downstairs neighbor came up for tea once, and he gave me the best darn cup of tea I've ever had. And I said, what is this? And he said, it's Texas Yaupon. And I had no idea that all that thickety yaupon that grows out in the creek bottoms, you can make tea out of it, and it's excellent. So tea has been kind of a minor motif through all 4 books. And so I got to do a whole riff on the slaves making this really good tea out of bushes out in the creek. And the white people would just have a fit if they knew we were having better tea than they do.
Yeah, that's in the book, and it's something I didn't write down as one of my questions, but that you sold the tea so well in this latest book. Um, is it? Can you purchase it somewhere or
Oh
what?
yeah, yeah. In fact, one of the producers at Texas History Films has a Yaupon tea company. You can get it Whole Foods or here in Austin at Wheatsville Co-op. You can get it in bags. You can get it loose leaf. Or I've got a Yaupon bush growing on my balcony. You just, toast the leaves and grind them up. It's that easy. Now, don't use the berries. The berries will make you really sick. In fact, the Latin name for it is Ilex vomitoria.
Oh,
Uh, but the leaves are wonderful.
I like the idea of introducing the public to events in our history using fictional history. I look at movies like Titanic, the movie Titanic, Saving Private Ryan, and a whole lot of other movies. So, and I do hope that your books end up becoming movies also, because, Barbary Pirates, how many people even know about that one? But what I was going to ask you is that how do you compare, writing historical fiction versus writing history itself? Was it more fun for you? Did you find it more enjoyable? Was it easier, or the pressures of making sure everything right? Because we mentioned Braveheart, and we know Braveheart. A lot of things on there, that from the kilts to who the real father of Edward III, among other things. But what did you have more fun with it? Fictional history versus history itself, or
Yeah. Writing historical fiction is about 6 times harder because you have to know the whole life, everything in it. My characters can't say okay until 1840. In fact, the second book, it's New England, it's autumn. Oh, I want dinner, pumpkin pie. That's a good way to start it. So I'm writing this scene and I thought, wait a minute, how do I know they had pumpkin pie? So you research, well, they had pumpkin pie, but it wasn't our pumpkin pie. Up until right about that time, pumpkin pie was a woman would make a custard of, eggs, cream, sugar, and she would pour it inside a hollow pumpkin and cook the whole pumpkin, and then they would slice that up, and that was pumpkin pie. They didn't have the custard that we have until about 1810, 1815, somewhere in there, as I discovered. So I not only got to have my pumpkin pie, I got to do a whole riff on the change and how Bliven's father really didn't like this change. He wanted the old real pumpkin pie or pencils. He's on the ship and he's logging down new crew members with a pencil. Wait a minute, did they have pencils? How do I know they had pencils? Well, it turned out that the first American pencil manufacturer was in New England in 1812. So I not only got to have a pencil, I got to do a whole riff on this new invention. That's one thing I've discovered is that if I get stuck in a story, if I'll just look closer at the history, it'll tell me what to do.
have you seen the Disney movie Johnny Tremaine about the Revolutionary War? It shows Paul Revere with a kind of a magic marker. If you ever
Maybe
watch
do a
it,
spit take.
yeah, if you ever watch it, it's like I'm like, wait a minute, that I don't think they had those back then.
what is that? A Sharpie?
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Oh man, come on, do your research. Yeah. Well, that's what I like about books like yours, the historical fiction, is that they can go out of the scope of exactly where they are and give you information that you weren't expecting. That's what I enjoy. I mean, I love the narrative of where the story is going from A to Z, but how you're able to bring in all of these other did you know about this? Or like the tea, like something like I had no idea. These are things that reading the book, it's historical fiction, and so whoever's reading it needs to go into it understanding it's fiction, but there's so much historical fact in these books that people can go back to it and be at least like, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to go and research that a little more and see how that lines up with actual history. So,
Yeah, no, I don't write these books just out of the endless wealth of my own knowledge. I mean, I'm discovering this stuff as I write it. And in the beginning of book 4, of course, it starts in 1834, and Blivin is in the Caribbean. Well, slavery is a big motif through all the books because the series will end up in the Civil War. But we forget that the British Empire did not outlaw slavery until the summer of 1834. That was a brand new thing for them. And they were very worried, well, what's going to happen down in Jamaica if we free all these people? And they had the example of what happened in Haiti, where the former French masters were just massacred. And then the slaves turned on each other, native speaker against French speaker, light skin against dark skin. It was just a bloodbath. And that gave some semblance of understanding to why planters in the American South so feared a slave rebellion. That fear did not come out of nowhere. So yeah, the more I would research a story, the art is, how does this apply to the historical fabric that I'm weaving?
What was that slave revolt? 1820 in Virginia. I forgot the guy's name.
Nat Turner.
Nat Turner. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, James,
compared to Haiti.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah,
No,
yeah.
Not even close.
In fact, the editor on that book made me tone down anything about what to do with Haiti, because she did not want American readers knowing that slaves could actually did that to each other. And so that was part of the modern era now that I have to combat in trying to get a story told, is, we don't want, people don't need to know that. Well, to me, history, the more you know, history is your personal inoculation against being fed horse manure. Everything that you believe about everything in the world that's important, what's right, what's wrong, what's moral or immoral, or how should you live, vote, worship, raise your children, everything you believe filters like coffee through what you understand about history or not. And when you've got a whole population that doesn't know bean dip about history, you get people who are easily led over a cliff.
Or easily offended.
Yeah.
Yes. And now we're in an age when the far left has really overtaken the far right in censoring people, which I never thought I would live to see. But here it is.
It's all just cyclical. It all just goes in a circle. It's a bad time for that. Unfortunately, my last question you sort of just answered. So I recently wrote a review on your book for the Epic Times. Should be probably coming out this coming week.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you.
Yeah, I speculate at the end that there will be a 5th installment, if not a 6th installment. And you mentioned that it will end in the Civil War. So that sort of answers my question, but are you working on your next installment, and is the next installment the Mexican-American War, or is it the Civil War? Is it somewhere in between?
I am so glad you asked that, Dustin, because when Nita and I were thinking about this way back in 2014, she instantly saw, once I got her going, oh, well, he could open Japan with Perry in the 1850s. He could be in the Opium War in China in 1842. He could be in the Caribbean fighting pirates in 1818. Well, I don't know how long I'm going to live, And so I was on a book tour, which was very surprising because you don't really get book tours anymore. But I was when Shores of Tripoli came out, I was in this waterfront bar in the throbbing metropolis of Pawcatuck, Connecticut. It's right on the border of Rhode Island. Two little towns right next to each other, but they both have a bookstore. So I'm in this brew pub with a tall boy in one hand and my notes in the other hand. And there's all these waterfront people out there, and they know this history already. And they're like, now in your book, you said this happened, but no, this is what really happened. And, yeah, but for the story, I need this. And there's an older lady out there who raised her hand. And she said, well, now, how long is this series going to go? I want to know how it ends. And I'm getting on up there. So we had a meeting and we decided, okay, 5 or 6, and we will go from beginning to end. And then maybe I can go back and fill in the Mexican-American War, what happened in California, or the Opium War in 1842. Or one of the things I really wanted to do was chasing down the Atlantic slave trade, the Atlantic Squadron chasing down slavers in the 1850s. Because a lot of people don't know that any captains who wanted to be good at that had to operate around the Secretary of the Navy, who was a slaveholder. And he would station the fleet in places where there would never be a slave ship to catch.
Wow. Oh, I didn't know that.
What about a prequel?
Yeah,
like
the 5th one will be the Civil War. That'll be the wind up. No spoilers. And then I will go back and start filling in the stories that I didn't get to write. I love your dog, by the way.
I was going to say, ladies and gentlemen, Madison has made her triumphant arrival. She has. Did you ever watch or did you ever read Family Circus, the comic strip?
Oh, yes.
And they would always do like the kid going to the park, and it's like all those dots everywhere to like show you where all they went just to get from like A to B. That's what she's done. She has gone all through this office doing the army crawl, trying to stay down. She's such
You're
nut.
too young to remember Family Circus.
Hey,
I
man,
remember Family Circus.
I appreciate
Dennis
that you do believe that I am too young. I can't thank you enough for that. Yeah. So
I was going to ask, what about a prequel? We have the quasi-war with France, got the Revolutionary War, And
Well, they're only 14 during the Barbary Pirate War, so that might be difficult. Now, that, by the way, that is one concession to modern sensibilities that I made, because midshipmen commonly were 11 or 12, not 14. In fact, there were full lieutenants who were only 15 at that time. But nobody today would believe that. So I had Blivin and Sam enter the Navy as midshipmen when they were 14.
Well, why don't you do like a father or uncle Anakin Putnam, and go forward.
So stupid.
Well, I tell you what, these characters are still totally fresh to me. I would love to do, I could do one of these a year from now until I go somewhere. And by the way, I just accepted a job. I've been in Austin over 40 years, but the guy that I used to work for at the state capitol is now the manager of a guest ranch in the Colorado Rockies. And he's taken it nonprofit, and they do, it's called the Pines Ranch. They provide free rest retreats for exhausted COVID nurses and first responders. And they're doing wonderful work. And when I visited him, he said, what would it take to get you up here? And I said, employment for life and no rent. He said, cool. So I'm packing, as you can see. And when I get up there, I will be doing nature walks and campfire talks and leading history tours. But most of my time, I just get to put my feet up and write my books and not worry about rent. So there will be more Putnams coming out of that, I guarantee you.
That sounds like the life worth living right there. Well, James, I tell you what, it's been fantastic having you on to discuss your new books. Madison has been very excited as well.
Well, I tell you what, one of the best things about the ranch is the head of security, who is a wolf that lives under the porch.
Wow. Okay.
Fortunately, he loves people. Actually, I think he's like a wolf Malamute cross. But totally untrained. But when one of the guests goes up, it's right at the San Isabel National Forest. So when one of the guests crosses the fence and goes for a hike in the wilderness, he goes too, and he protects people because we're his pack.
Okay. Well, luckily it's not just the bones of Jack London.
No, although he has taken on bears before.
Oh, yeah. Well, I bet. That's freaking awesome.
Well, if you do any prequels, I can make a suggestion for a name of one of your books called "The War of Putnam's Ear." I think no one's thought of that one.
Oh, you've been waiting for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, come on,
Everybody shut up. Let me get this
it's
in
my
there.
turn to talk. Maybe change it up a bit, his nose or something. I don't know.
Beautiful. Well, James, thank you again so much for being on the show. This has been a lot of fun for us.
It's been a great pleasure for me, let me tell you.
So, what'd you think?
I loved it.
Delightful fellow. You like that?
Oh, wow. Brought in the Allenby. I like it.
You know, I'm gonna
knew
try
you
to
were gonna
remember
do it.
that you're undisciplined. You're on something. Speaks 7 languages.
Are you talking about T.E. Lawrence?
Expert in when he was doing the.
Yeah.
And then there's a funny scene where someone jumps, like when he captures Aqaba. You can see the legs behind, but you don't see the guy's face.
Fantastic.
Outstanding, sir.
Oh, wow. You're really diving all in on that British accent now.
Well, let's talk about.
Yeah, exactly. But I was just impressed. Speaking of impressed, I really loved that conversation with James Haley. A lot of fun.
Yeah, it
A
is.
lot of fun to talk about how to put together his historical fiction novels.
You've picked some really great winners. Let me tell you.
Thank you.
This guy was. This is when we go to
Now I
Austin.
just need to pick one more to fill in that chair.
We should. We should go drink a beer together. Just me, not this
exactly,
guy.
just one of us. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun, ladies and gentlemen. Honestly, I can say I've read 2 of the 4 books. I read the first one, and I've read this most recent one, and they are a lot of fun to read. It is. I mean, you're on the ocean. You're having these sea battles. You're on these old ships of the lines, as he called them, the tall ships.
Mm-hmm.
It's just. It takes you away. And here's the thing. Christmas is coming up, and I'm not, whatever. Christmas is coming up. This would be great for if you've got teenagers or if you've got, a husband or a dad who likes naval history or maritime stories. This is a great buy. I mean,
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend getting this stuff for your kids. I would go teens.
And it's about an American.
You know,
You don't have to. If you're Irish or something and you don't want to read about a British guy, here you go.
Exactly.
Or
Or if
Hornblower or some of those other guys. But and they're good books. And I mentioned this to him about Stephen Crane, the Red Badge of Courage. People thought this guy must have been in combat in the Civil War, but he wasn't. But the way he depicted the battle scenes was very. Very accurate. So, and it's the same thing with this. Now, judging by the fact that we were talking to him, I assumed he was not around for any of these naval engagements.
assume
so.
so.
Yeah, unless he's a Highlander, which that's Scottish thing for you. But
Exactly.
But yeah, his books, you feel like you're there.
I think the possibilities
yeah.
are endless. He did say, in my former life, I
Yeah.
think that I was, in the Navy or something. along
And
those lines,
I
so.
did suck on a few limes as I was reading those books.
Well, you got to fight the scurvy.
Yeah,
So, yeah, you don't. Yeah, terrible. And speaking of, he actually mentions that in the first book. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, book and movie recommendations. All right, so book recommendation. I think it is synonymous and anonymous and what is it when everybody's in favor of one particular thing?
Consensus type of thing.
Yeah, I know that's what we're going for. It was unanimous. That's what I was going for.
Settled. It's like they say, it's settled science.
Yeah, yeah, and follow the science.
And you don't have to wear a mask to read these.
Oh God, I could go on. So there are 4 books, and I'm just telling you, go check these out. James Haley. I mean, also
There'll be a 5th one too. He's saying.
Yeah, he was saying that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's going to be Mexican-American War, Civil War, or what, but it's going to be good. I can almost guarantee you.
I think he does need to do a prequel, but that's just me.
A prequel?
Yeah. Like Rogue One.
like
Rogue
moving-
One was a fantastic movie in the Star Wars series, and you could do one, the quasi-war with France.
Yeah, but may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Everybody dies in Rogue One. So, anyways, so his prequel would wipe out the main character. So, all right.
Well-
all right. My movie recommendation. Hold on. I want you to do your movie recommendation so people will know exactly why I'm doing this movie recommendation.
Okay. I don't even remember what you're recommending, but I'll do
You mean
mine. Okay.
remember the post about the robots and the science and all that?
Yeah.
That's one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Which Battlestar Galactica
I'm
has.
glad I'm reminding you of the
Battlestar,
reason why you wanted to do these movies. Go
Battlestar
ahead.
Galactica, which is one of the movies. Actually, okay, the Battlestar Galactica miniseries, the one that came out in the 2000s with Edward James Olmos, who was in
American Graffiti.
Huh?
Go ahead.
No. Okay, all right. I'm going to pick a series of movies, and there's a reason for it. They all kind of have a common theme. Terminator, Jurassic Park, Screamers with Peter Weller, and it's a kind of an unknown movie. It's actually pretty good.
And so is Peter Weller. Go ahead.
RoboCop, come on. Okay, so
He had a mask on the whole time.
and then the Battlestar. Did I mention Battlestar Galactica already?
Yeah, you went through
Battlestar
like a whole...
Galactica, Terminator, Screamers, and Jurassic Park. Okay, now what's the theme on those? Playing God. Self-replicating. The reason why I'm doing that is because the whole Xenobot thing. I'm reading about Xenobots. I mean, even Elon Musk was like, "Don't do it." And we've had warnings in literature, and even logically speaking, if AI does come into existence and they realize, because humans are flawed, and a machine's gonna think, we need to get rid of people, and
And here recently, I sent you that, or you saw that
I
post.
was reading about, and yeah, you posted
CNN
something, but I've been
posted.
reading about the Xenobots, and I'm like, going, this is nuts.
They're able to
Study the science. Science. I'm not anti-science, but the audacity of arrogance.
I'm anti-mad scientist.
The arrogance of Fauci saying, if you attack me, you attack science. Science created the Africanized killer bees, and that's a true story.
Yeah.
They invented a bunch of horrible things. So it's not like, science is great, but science can, when it's misused, and I think that this is a misuse of
Oh,
of
absolutely.
science.
And which leads me to my movie recommendation, Blade Runner. You won't know the difference between regular people and replicants. With what I recently saw, actually, I think it was today that I posted that, you've got robots that are capable of reproducing like regular human beings. I mean, come on. We're going right into like Ridley Scott's world, which is freaking jacked up. So anyways, not to put your week on a downward spiral, but we're all going to die.
Okay, the bat coronavirus, and they checked to see in Wuhan, they checked to see if, you could get the bat coronavirus and it can hit a human being.
Yep.
They've got viruses there that have a 50% mortality.
Correct. Yeah.
Playing God.
Or,
bad idea.
Or like playing Satan. It's just like
bad
trying
idea.
to wipe out
Bad
all
idea.
of civilization.
Yeah.
So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that brings our show to an end. Next week, we've got a very special guest. It's our final episode of the season, Joel Berry of the Babylon Bee. They have recently come out with their new book, The Babylon Bee Guide to Wokeness. It's
Are you joking? Are
freaking
you being
hilarious.
serious?
We already did that. We did that last week.
Did we?
Is this satire? Is this satire? I need you to remember the jokes that you've already
it
done.
was funny then. I think it's funny now. You don't like my jokes, do you?
It's not so much your jokes that I don't like. It's your entire persona.
I had this discussion with a friend of mine. You remember that party that I was at where they,
Where they didn't like you?
they didn't like me?
Yeah.
I can't understand why, but
I can name
I made a joke. I made a joke about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, and it was supposed to be, a typical misogynistic joke, and instead they took it as being racist. I'm like, are you kidding me?
It's
Didn't even cross.
Come on, this
Come
is
on,
misogynistic.
I'm trying to be misogynistic here.
You totally
And-
missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He thought. It's like,
What's
I
sad
don't
is
think-
that that's a joke that more or less tells itself. Those two. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right. Where can people find us and hang out more than what they do now?
Not at parties in Houston, I'll tell you that much, because they're not going to invite me ever again. But you can find us.
Unless you want to hang out with somebody with jokes that don't land.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Subscribe. Now, if we get shadow banned or banned altogether, which could inevitably happen.
I see it's transferring over to you.
Yeah. We do have our very own website, www.thesonsofhistory.com.
That's right. And we'll be there. All right, that's it, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
I am going to start trying to do
I hope we
some...
get to...
Oh,
I hope we get to next week's episode before the replicants actually do come and kill us. That's going to suck.
Xenobots.
If we're in the middle of like the third season and then all of a sudden tap on the door and it's...
My fear of Xenobots, is that a form of xenophobia?
Ooh.
Is that wrong? Is that... Anyway, I do want to mention that I'm doing, hopefully, if I don't fail, I should... Hopefully tomorrow nothing happens. I'm going to do a special on the Pearl Harbor attack. Now, this isn't going to be just about what happened at Pearl Harbor. It's going to be why it happened, why it was such a big deal, why it really pissed off America more than anything else, and what the aftermath was, and what else was going on, because it wasn't just Pearl Harbor that the Japanese were attacking. So,
that's right.
And maybe, hopefully, we can learn from it, because there was an important lesson to be learned from why it happened.
It's the 80th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack, and I reached out to Tracy Hunter, who does the World War II documentaries, and she asked, are you guys going to be in Pearl Harbor? Meaning, she'll be there. And she was like, I'll send you guys some photos. I'm like, dang, wish we could go there. But no, we're not able to make it. So
I was there 40 years ago,
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. We will 40 years ago.
Yeah, I was there 40 years ago.
On the 40th
I think it was
anniversary.
in December of 81.
All right. Well,
I think. Or no. It was December
I knew it.
1980. December 1980 that we were there.
41 years ago.
41 years ago. Yeah.
Hey.
Missed it by a year.
Missed it by 1 year. All right. See you later, everyone.